This is your fourth studio album? Yeah.
I think it's might be more than that. I've lost count.
Yeah. So have you got tried and true recording methods now, or do you still experiment?
A bit of both. I mean, we like to always experiment because, you know, we don't want to kind of just do the same thing. But I guess we do have a baseline that
for the beds maybe.
Yeah,
a bit of a record to tape and.
Yeah, we always record to analog tape for the band, and we always record that live. And we more often than not record the vocals and stuff as a separate take. You know.
Yeah. Tell me about the gear that you guys used on the album.
So for the drums, it's funny enough, we used a 4 miking system, and tends to be pretty basic mics. And we have 2, I guess, unusual spots. We have a ribbon mic usually just sort of outside the front of the kit to the right near the hi-hat, and then we have another one next to the drummer's ear, which is just usually a SM58.
Yeah.
And between those 2 mics plus a kick and snare mic, we can kind of get a bit of the room sound, and the ear mic gives us this kind of nice crunchy sort of I guess it's sort of a vintage sort of sound on the drums. I mean, all the instruments are vintage as well, so they kind of all add up to being quite a retro sound.
Yeah.
And then on the guitar, we had a ribbon mic this time, didn't we? We used the M160, the Bayer Dynamic. And then on the Leslie,
awesome.
We had what do we have? We had more ribbons on the Leslie as well. I guess, you know, within the era of that vintage sound, kind of using lots of ribbon mics and dynamic mics, as well as because we record in the one room, we want to have nice sort of separation.
Yeah. Tell me about your organ, Jake.
Oh, the organ, which is just behind us here. All right, in the studio here, Cookin On 3 burners. We're just looking at some of the gear that we use for our recordings, and this is a 1960, I think it might be a 64, I don't have the exact date stamp, Hammond A100, and the A100 is pretty much identical to the B3 and the C3, except it has a few extra speakers down the bottom for home use, but the sound of the classic B3. And that goes into this valve Leslie, which is a custom Leslie that I built from an old transistor Leslie. So I converted it from transistor to valve and added a few extra components in there. So that's kind of the sound of the Hammond organ, and that mixed with the drums. And this sometimes is the drum kit that we use for the Cookin On 3 burners recordings, and other times Ivan brings one of his. But usually the classic sort of jazz soul sizes of a 20-inch kick drum, and as I was saying before, we use a 4 mic setup on the drums, and on the Leslie we tend to use just two mics, usually an RE20 on the bottom, which is always good for getting that bottom end direct, and a ribbon on the top. You know, whether it's a Royer 121 or sometimes a Bayer Dynamic M160. So here, once we pretty much record everything, even though there's no glass between the two, we record everything straight onto this tape machine. And so we get about 20 minutes or so on there, and then we dump it down into the computer. And I guess we have a bunch of outboard gear that we use both when we're tracking straight to that and later on in the computer. Most of the things come through this 8-channel of Crane Song preamps, which is a great. You can get sort of some really clean or some quite sort of I guess gritty sounds through that. And then our monitoring, just some Dyne Audios, which is a great pair of active monitors, and then occasionally we flip to the NS10s just to get some reference on something, how it sounds through some other speakers. Some of the other bits of gear that tend to be really handy in the Cookin On 3 burners sound, which is actually, the reason it's not here but it's here, is this spring reverb tank. It has a controller that's actually ducked in behind, but a lot of the spring reverbs that you hear on the recordings are added afterwards, and the real spring reverb. This is also another spring reverb that we use, and I guess the compressors, the 1176, are also kind of handy for the kind of fizzy sort of top end on a lot of the vocals that we use. All right,
so for the Cookin On 3 burners guitar sound, we don't really use effects. I just kind of go straight into an amp, a clean valve amp, like a Fender usually. And I play a late 60s Gibson 335 for the main body of the stuff, and that's what I use live. But for overdubs, I like to get a few different sounds on top of that. So one of the axes I've been using is this Mustang copy. It's a fresher. It's from Japan in the early 70s. It's my awesome crappy guitar at the moment. And I use this M160, or Jake uses it. He lets me hold it for the demo, which is an amazing ribbon mic, small ribbon mic. And then we give it a good slam through the 1176 post-recording. I love it. It's really good.